we always see that, they don't maintain eye contact, or they will be having certain visual stims, but what to do about them is always a big question mark, right? How you can get them out with their the functional areas of vision, as well as the visual stims and the visual sensitivities. So let us try. I'll probably today I'll try to focus it to let you know what are the new methods which have come and how you need to be really working in terms of getting your children to be more focused and more to remain visually attentive, and to remain visually focused, and to help them out with visual perceptual skills. As all of us know, vision is one of the major sense which enables us to learn, right? I mean, it is one of the major sense where a lot of information is processed and a lot of information is registered. One of the major component of learning, constructive learning in children. We definitely know that autism is, why the exact cause of autism is not clear and entirely known as on date. So the reason visual issues develop is also not completely clear in it. But what is apparent at this point of time is that it is common for people with autism to have visual problems and visual processing concerns. So I don't know how many of you would be will be there. How many of you are there? How many of your children are there with you at this point of time? Down the line, if your kids are there, just try to get them do certain things which I'm going to tell. And if they are not there, pen it down, and you can later stages, whenever your kids are available with you, you can try out with them. See, the major many autistic behaviors may seem unrelated to visual problems, but in truth, they may be actually be caused or exacerbated by poor visual skills. So things like, poor eye contact, looking through objects, extreme fear of heights, or absence of fear for heights, inability to track moving objects, and problem with eye alignment, lazy eyes, and light sensitivities, looking at the object from the sides of the eye, or staring at objects, or playing with this switchboards, or blinking, staring into the space without any reason, and rolling of eyes, and flapping of their fingers in front of the eyes, and hand flapping, and alignment of objects in straight lines, which we usually, one of the classic things, and playing with the doors opening and closing, and playing or gazing intensely into spinning objects. These are certain things which usually most of our children would be having, or they are termed as certain concerns with them, right? So when you talk about, if those are the symptoms, and when you talk about visual sensitivities, we talk about hyposensitivity and hypersensitivity, right? So if a child is hypersensitivity to vision, the focusing on tiny pieces of dust and particles will be there, and the dislike of dark and bright lights, dislike of sharp flashes of lights, looking down, they will be looking down most of the time in order to avoid any kind of light flashing into them, and covering and closing of eyes whenever a bright light is presented to them. So these are certain classical things, without getting overwhelmed and looking into it. These are those certain classical examples of visual hypersensitivities in kids. And the hyposensitivity components which usually you will look at, you will get to know is they're too much attracted to the lights, and looking intensely at people or object, and moving fingers or any object in front of their eyes, and fascination with their reflection, and looking at themselves in the mirrors, and brightly colored objects, carrying certain brightly colored objects in their hands, and running hands around the edges of the objects. These are certain things for the hyposensitivity component of visual sensitivity. So we all know all these things, right? But what has happened in the recent studies for the visual and visual sensitivities and the functions of the vision, usually I'll just try to share uh, a screen here to take you through. Well, I hope, Sojani, is it clear?
Yes, it's clear, sir.
Okay, so what is the perception is that usually children with autism, they have, these are the precise areas where there is a red marks and the yellow marks on the brain are mapped. They say that when they did these studies on children to really see why they will be having this visual consents is basically they have figured out with the EEG studies and with the MRI studies that they have figured out exactly these areas, the occipital gyrus and the fusiform and the temporal sulci, which will be there around here, are affected in them, and they are the visual higher centers in children. Okay, and here if you see there is a green colored spot on the brain which is called amygdala. Amygdala is nothing but you call it as a traffic controller. We call it as a traffic controller for all the senses which come, and from there amygdala process the information to those particular areas in the brain. So they have understood that children with autism doesn't have concerns with their visual movements or the muscle which helps them to view the object, but they have a concern in the way they process that information, and that is what is evident with this particular mapping on the brain. And what are those functional areas which we actually this vision does? The vision involves four visual skills necessary for learning. See, vision is different and visual skills are different. And when you talk about visual skills, this is how the first one which comes is their ability to track. When you say ability to track, you're without moving the head, without movement of the head, you should be able to track any moving thing or anything on if you have to read. Now, if you really see, uh, if 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 any, can anybody read this? Can anybody do that?
The cat ran out of the when house, the door was left open.
That is precisely what happens. Imagine for us with good vision and with good visual processing skills, when it is comes in a random thing, the way you track and the way you move and way brain interprets the information. Now, if you see the second line in this is all reversal, right? Even if it is reversal, uh, I don't know who read this. He was able to recollect it from his previous registration, the THE, the house, when, sorry, even then if it is, even then in reversal format is still able to do it, and that's what your eye exactly does. That is your ability to track. That the ability to track is what is helping you out. Even if the letters are reversed, you are still able to read them the way it is. And children with autism specifically will have a big concern with their tracking. We'll come to that in the later stages. And the second one is their ability to focus, whether it is the near things or the far things. And what they really understood is certain children have concerns with their far vision and certain children have concerns with their near focusing ability. And that is what the health of the eye. And when you talk about it, these are called eye movement disorders. And in these eye movement disorders, most of the children who are on the spectrum are found to be having two concerns. One area of concern, what they say is that crossed eye. Crossed eye is nothing but strabismus in the medical terminology. This crossed eye, they have figured out near to 21 to 50% of children on the spectrum will have this eye movement disorder, which is called as crossed eye or strabismus, number one. And number two, they will not be able to focus, or their focus will, they will be having a blurred vision in front of them if the object is presented in the midline. That is the reason they tend to see from the side of their eyes. That's the reason the peripheral vision component of it gets more established because of this astigmatism. They call it as astigmatism. And many of the children are found to be having astigmatism also who are there on the spectrum. So the first things first, what you need to be doing at this point of time is you need to get your children tested to see whether they are able to track and whether they are able to focus, especially rule out these refractive errors in terms of strabismus or in terms of astigmatism, and provide them, if there is some concern with that, provide them with the spectacles. It will, the person who is evaluating them will be able to determine on what is required, and they will be doing it for you. So don't worry, but get your children evaluated for these two areas. Okay. And then comes the other component of eye teaming. This is found to be the major concern for children with autism. Their ability of the brain to localize objects at the correct distance, so the lines of sight from both eyes intersect at the object. That means ability of their eyes to bring them together to view one object. If you really see, this is what is poor eye teaming, because they are meeting somewhere on top of it, above it, or after it, but they're not meeting here, they're meeting here. So their ability to visualize certain things is already compromised. A good eye teaming is this is what they should be able to do, but if you see, this is what happens in them. And that is the precise reason that their ability to remain focused, or ability to track, or ability to appreciate an object becomes difficulty for them. Okay. And then comes, if these all are not corrected, usually the other component which we usually see when we talk about visual skills is visual perceptual skills. And most of our children, if you really look, either when they have started writing or either when they are doing it now, you will find this reversal of letters, right? B becoming D, D becoming P becoming Q. You know, that reversal, three in a different way, three comes the other side. You know, that right and left discrimination part of it, top and down discrimination part of it. All those skills will be bit affected in them, right? So these are the precise four skills: tracking, focusing, and eye teaming, and visual perceptual skills are the major things which affect them, that makes them not to have the visual skills the way it needs to be and it's supposed to be. Now, often this visual spatial process becomes affected, causing child to isolate on details and perseverate visual attention on repetitive visual behaviors. Because of their inability to do this, that is the reason they land up in having visual STIMS. That's the precise reason why they will land up having this visual STIMS. But most of the time it is misunderstood, thinking that they are able to stimulate their senses or to decrease the sensory overload is what we think, or to adapt to unfamiliar environments, or to reduce anxiety, or to express frustration if they are non-verbal, and avoid certain expectations which need to be performed, right? That's the thing. Usually they talk about why a child will be having visual stims, right? But on the contrary, on the other side of it, yes, there could be the reasons on the behavioral component of it, but the reasons behind this visual stim could be basically they didn't develop eye tracking, they could not have, they didn't develop this eye focusing, eye teaming is not established in them, and they are having visual perceptual processing disorders with them. So whenever you go for an evaluation in these components, whenever you are looking for getting your kids evaluated on these components, the precise things what you need to be looking forward or asking the person who is evaluating should be, number one, first see for these primitive reflexes whether they are still retained in your kids. For example, there are 5 primitive reflexes which plays a vital role if a child has not developed visual skills the way it should be. The first one in that is a Moro's reflex, which will affect their eye movements and which will affect their visual processing as such completely. And then comes their tonic labyrinthine reflex, TLR, tonic labyrinthine reflex, which again affects their eye movements, it will affect their visual perceptual skills and spatial related concerns. Visual perceptual and spatial related concerns. Then comes your symmetrical tonic neck reflex, which is STNR, symmetrical tonic neck reflex. This will affect their ability to fix an object, as precisely the eye teaming which I was talking about, and their ability to focus near and far, and crossing midline will become a big difficulty, and tracking. So if you see all the visual skills, if they are affected, the precise reason behind that could be a retained primitive reflex like symmetrical tonic neck reflex can affect all the visual skills. And then comes your ATNR, which is asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. And if this is still persistent, your child will be having problems in midline issues, their ability to balance, and their ability to eye track, and laterality, which side it comes, laterality of the movement, and handwriting skills are precisely affected, which in other words, their ability to focus, and they will be not having a smooth pursuits. They will be having poor pursuits in terms of their eye movements. And another one which comes is vestibulo-ocular reflex, which is a very, very important reflex in children or in adults, because this is one reflex which develops at starts at birth, and it will remain with us for a longer duration of time. And adaptation of this particular reflex is essential to ensure that the gaze stability remains throughout the life. What it means, like even if you move your head, I can still fix my eyes on the, if I turn my head like this, I can still fix my eye on the system. All of you can just turn your head and look through your eyes. If your head is turning towards right, your eyes will turn to left. So they move in opposite direction so that you don't lose focus on the object. The gaze is not disturbed. So that is what is vestibulo-ocular reflex. So usually what happens with this is, during first few years of life, this reflex is continuously getting adjusted to account for larger changes in size of head. We all know that the size of the head will increase from 0 to 1 years, right? So as the size of the head increases, they keep getting adapted. And later in life also, to account for the magnification for corrective lenses, once, like for say, now I use the specs, right? I use the specs. So when I use the specs, again there is some adaptation taking place, again there is some magnification taking place. And as you keep growing old, because of the reception in our eyes keeps decreasing, so again it keeps getting adjusted. So vestibulo-ocular reflex is something which starts at birth but keeps getting adapted throughout the life. And VOR, this vestibulo-ocular reflex, produces eye movements that are equal in magnitude but opposite in direction of head, in order to stabilize gaze over a wide range of unexpected head movements. Like even if you're just turning like that, you will remain focused. Head moves at a very random velocity whenever you move or whenever you are doing some activities. And precisely this is one of the reflex where our children suffer. That's the reason when you call them, they might turn head to look at you, but they will not be able to turn only the eyes. Okay, the mismatch between this vision and the vestibular system, or the vestibular stimuli, or their inability to get adapted, will result in blurred vision or visual acuity, or it will not allow them to develop visual skills which we spoke about, like tracking or focusing or eye teaming or visual perceptual skills. So usually what they evaluate, probably these are certain terms which are a bit medical, but I really cannot I really can't avoid using them. So if you really have a pen and paper, please pen it down. And usually that's how we look at it. And these are certain, I'll just show you certain pics so that you can understand how you need to really look at it. Yeah. So the different tests, what they do is called, number one, they'll check spatial vision. Please pen it down. They check spatial vision, in which they will look into this visual acuity, and they will look into static contrast sensitivity. Static contrast sensitivity, then dynamic contrast sensitivity, like precisely the pictures what you see. These are all for the static contrast testing which they do. Like, their ability to visualize it with high standards of frequency and low standards of frequency, and you can see that, right? And their ability to do it in an embedded counters, and that's how you need to test this components which needs to be measured in them. So visual acuity, static contrast sensitivity, dynamic contrast sensitivity, then static shape perception, visual completion, and reading test. So these are certain tests which they do. And if this page is for static thing, the dynamic thing is how, if you really look at this, this is actually this will be displayed on a screen where these dots will be traveling from left to right, and the dots will be spinning around, and these numbers will be getting rotated, and child needs to match the shapes and the numbers. So this is a dynamic thing. And if you really see, they clearly mention here low local and global noise, high global noise and high local noise. What it means is your vision is associated with your auditory system, and your ability to do your work always depends upon in what kind of ability to do the work with your eyes, always depends on your ability to listen, also to work in an environment where it is low noise and where it is high noise. So they go hand in hand. So they do the test in that way to really figure that out. And the other component which comes up, these are the factors which they need to evaluate in spatial vision. And when it comes to the other side of it, the color vision, they look for the color vision, they look for the depth perception and motion perception. Color vision, motion perception, depth perception. And now the most important component, which goes into a lot of research and a lot of work which has been done on that, they say perception of faces, right? One of the major problem what we have with our children is their inability to maintain eye contact. And this precise inability to maintain eye contact, they have figured it out that our children will have concerns with gaze detection. Concerns with gaze detection, because their aversive to direct gaze is what makes it difficult for them to look at especially the eye region of our face, especially the eye region of the face. So the attentional difficulty resulting in unusual eye gaze, which then results for them to have unusual visual experience. That is the precise reason why our children really does not maintain eye contact. So the other reason which comes along with this particular thing is, if you really, I'm just talking to all of you from different perspectives. Like it could be from a behavioral optometrist perspective, or it could be from a ophthalmologist perspective, or a sensory integration perspective, or a biomedical perspective. And if you really look in from the biomedical perspective of it, they precisely say that their inability to gaze, they also say that they will be having trouble with this gaze, But the theory behind why they say they are having this trouble with having this gaze is probably the vitamin A or B12. And there is something called as G protein. There is something called as G protein in this particular vitamin, and this G protein is found to be damaged. This G protein is found to be damaged in our children, and that is one of the reason why probably they may not be able to maintain this eye contact. So it is important that get this visual test done for the eye teaming, tracking, focusing, and visual perceptual skills. Along with that, see that whether your child is deficient on this G protein or whether they are having this damaged G protein going with them. Okay, so these are the certain things which you really need to know. And usually, to make it simpler for you, all those things which I have told, all those things which I mentioned, like, spatial vision and the components under spatial vision, the color vision and the perception of faces, all these things, usually there are certain things you need to ask your ophthalmologist or your behavioral optometrist or your sensory integration therapist to evaluate your child's eye movements, to evaluate your child's eye teaming, to evaluate eye tracking, their convergence of eyes, their visual processing, their visual spatial judgment, and their central and peripheral vision. I'll repeat them: eye movements, eye teaming, eye tracking, convergence, visual processing, visual spatial judgment, central and peripheral vision. Central and peripheral vision. These are the things which you need to be really looking at, and what you have to do with your kids at this point of time to really know, to really figure it out whether they are having this ability to, whether their eye movements are in sync with their functional skills. So make them walk on a straight line. Make them walk on a straight line, draw a straight line, make them walk on a straight line, and ask them to take at least 6 steps by placing their hands on the hip. If they are moving out of that, if they are not able to maintain themselves on that straight line, if their legs are going out of that straight line, or even if they take off their hands to balance themselves, then that means there is a concern. And then make them stand on one leg with eyes open, and make them stand with feet apart on a line with eyes closed for 10 seconds. For 10 seconds, and see whether they are able to maintain it or not. And make them touch, make them stand with feet together, arms completely stretched out, and ask them to, with the index finger pointing like this, and ask them to bring and touch their nose. And they need to be able to do it alternately with their fingers to really know whether they are having any concerns or not, and they should be able to achieve a maximum score of 4 out of 4 with both the hands. And stand 10 feet apart, and ask them to catch a ball. Throw a ball underarm, ask them to catch a ball in the air. They should not be catching the ball closer to their body like this. They should be able to catch the ball in the air. And make them stand, ask them to bounce the ball, and ask them to catch that bounced ball. So if they're able to do all these things, it's good. But if they are not able to do these things, then definitely there is a concern with their visual functioning abilities. Now, the recent things, I don't know how many of your parents really know about it, but the recent optokinetics, the way we talk about optokinetics now, is all about each lobe of the brain perceives this information from your eyes in a different way with a different background. So pen it down. If your therapist or if anybody is trying to stimulate the parietal lobe, and if a child is having concerns with the functionality of the parietal lobe, usually parietal lobe is the one which does a lot of your visual activities. So parietal lobe, if you have to stimulate this parietal lobe, then you need to use low contrast lights. Please pen it down. You need to use low contrast lights, and that particular thing needs to be, the medium of that needs to be at a high processing speed. And the colors, the specific colors which you need to give if you are trying to stimulate your parietal lobe, the colors are the blue end of the spectrum. The blue end of the spectrum in the sense our VIBGYOR spectrum, the rainbow spectrum. The blue end of the spectrum is what your parietal lobe gets immediately stimulated, and the size of the letters or the pictures what you use are always needs to be large. Okay, so I'll repeat them. If you are using, if you are trying to stimulate the parietal lobe, you need to be using low contrast light, with high processing speed, and the color what you need to be using is this blue end of the spectrum, and the size needs to be larger. And if you are trying to focus on the temporal lobe, if you are trying to stimulate the temporal lobe, then it's all opposite to what I told in parietal lobe. Like, you will be using high contrast lights, and the processing speed needs to be low, and the the size of the objects need to be very small, and the color needs to be red end of the spectrum. Colors need to be red end of the spectrum. Now, this is for the parietal lobe and the temporal lobe. Now, if you're talking about stimulating the left side of the brain and right side of the brain as whole, left hemisphere and right hemisphere. If you're trying to stimulate the right side of the brain, then you are working with peripheral vision. You expect your child to see from the sides, and you use big objects. And this particular thing, you need to use faster movements. And the colors what you precisely will be using on the VIBGYOR is blue, indigo, purple, and green. If you're trying to stimulate right side of the brain, the colors what you use is blue, indigo, purple, and green. And the size needs to be large with low contrast. I'll repeat, right side of the brain, you use peripheral field of the vision, use bigger objects, and the processing speed is high, and the colors blue, indigo, purple, and green, and the size needs to be large with a low contrast. And if you're stimulating the left side of the brain, it needs to be in the central field, whereas, as I said, right side, you are working with the peripheral vision, right? If you're trying to stimulate the left side of the brain, it is the central field vision, and the speed needs to be slow, and the colors what you use is red, orange, yellow, and the size is smaller with higher contrast. Okay, so this is how you use the spectacles. That's the reason why they ask always to when you use the spectacles. Usually nowadays, I don't know how many of you have really worked with your children. Now there is a specific way of working with these kids with the different kinds of lenses, and the way they use now to help a child develop visual skills, or to reduce visual STIMS, or to have a proper visual perceptual skills, is that you need to be giving them a red color glass to their right side and blue color glass to their left side, because that's how the brain gets it. So that's how the specs also are coming now. That kind of specs are available in Amazon, so you can place an order for that and you get it. And along with that, what they do is they precisely take these kind of pictures. They precisely make a child wear that and take these kind of pictures, which will have different movements, different tracking in terms of horizontal, vertical, the diagonal, and the circular movements, circular tracking which takes place in the eye. So they keep those specs and help get these kind of videos, and they keep playing it on the screen and ask the child to follow those particular patterns which are there on the thing, to develop eye tracking, eye teaming, and eye focusing, and the convergent skills of the eye. So those probably who are going for vision therapy or visual therapies with a behavioral optometrist, precisely this is the work what they do. They'll keep them with these specs and give a movement which takes place on the screen, and that will help them to improve their eye contact, to improve their eye teaming skills, for their convergence, for their eye tracking, and for their focusing. So once these are established, then comes the role of your sensory integration therapist, which will help developing this vestibulo-ocular reflex in order to develop depth perception, visual processing, visual memory, visual motor integration, and eye-hand coordination. So precisely these are the components which are there in that visual context, in the context of visual sense. So the first thing first, so they, as I said, as per the brain, the way they want to stimulate the side of the brain, basing on that they'll give you a set of goggles which is red, in one will be red, one will be blue, and they will give different pattern movements which takes place in front of them, precisely for that four components to develop. That is, you can do it at home too. This is something which is but depends upon, first you need to rule out whether child is having any visual acuity concerns. If child is not having any visual acuity concerns, then you can go ahead with this at home also. Okay, so these are the skills which these are the skills which we really precisely focus on developing eye contact, developing their reception through their sense of eye, developing their processing the information, processing the stimulus, what they received with the eye to the brain, and getting it registered properly, and thereby developing proper head and body coordination, bilateral hand coordination, and bilateral feet coordination, or crossing midline and working in midline fashion. So these are the things what you need to be doing. And apart from that, there will be a set standard program, the way they usually take it forward. And this set standard program is that they work for 60 minutes. They work for 60 minutes in a structured with a structured physical activity, and they then a minimum of 60 minutes in an unstructured physical activity, and trying to provide as many as stimulating lights at home, stimulating lights at home, whether depending upon taking into consideration regarding their hyper and hyposensitivities. As I said, in the beginning, as I mentioned, the particular patterns of hypo and hypersen, basing on that, they will choose the kind of lights what needs to be given to these kids to engage them, or not to have these issues of sensitivities going forward. So these are the things which usually takes place with visual therapy. And there is another one which is important to know here is they work with prisms. They work with prisms, and those prisms are there two kinds of prism glasses. One is yoked prism glass, and another one is ambient prism glass. So that depends upon what kind of difficulties child is having. They will give you these yoked prisms or ambient prisms, and this can be worn throughout the day or for the specific training purpose. So what it usually does is it helps in eye teaming. Can you see this? Like usually, normally, if the left eye is going on to the picture here, the bird's picture here, right eye is not teaming up with this left eye, so that the focus remains good. But what this prism does is, instead of this going at a different side of it, this prism helps in getting this eye teaming together, so that child can have a clear vision of the object what it is there. So it has done really good. So usually first they train a child with prisms in the centers, and then they prescribe these prisms to be taken back home, so that the teaming occurs and the focusing and the visual attention develops in a child. So this is how you need to be looking at it. So it is a multidisciplinary concept, and it has taken leaps and bounds in terms of helping children to maintain proper eye contact, helping children to reduce their visual stims, helping children in their ability to learn, read and write. Those skills have improved a lot because it all does is improves their visual attention, their tracking, their focusing, and their teaming and their perceptual skills. So I hope I was clear. So Saujanya, any questions for me? I can take them.
So much, sir. We shall take a few questions, time permitting. So anyone has a question, can you please ask? Lakshmi Narayana, you
Or
have
anybody, if they didn't understand also, I'm ready to repeat those things which they didn't understand.
Yes, sir.
Question from my side. This is Venkat. So where to do this evaluation to understand what is the gap? Is it hyper or hypo? And between various components that you mentioned, which one is lacking, where we need to improve? Who can do that evaluation can help us out?
Behavioral optometrists. They are called as behavioral optometrists.
Okay, okay.
Or
Thank you.
your sensory integration therapist can also do that. Two people, behavioral optometrist and sensory integration therapist.
Thank you.
What are those glasses called on Amazon? That was one of the questions. What are those glasses that you mentioned called?
I think if I'm not wrong, it starts with ECO something, Saujanya, ECO.
Okay, sir.
There are 3D glasses which are usually used for children to play these 3D games.
Okay, thank you. Next question is how to test this eye-related issues with non-verbal kids? They are unable to read or tell. Is there any standard test for kids?
No, that's where precisely a behavioral optometrist will play a role.
Okay. Um,
In India, how to test, sir? In Hyderabad, any facilities?
But nobody is there, but in Chennai you will have.
Yeah.
In Chennai you have, and if I'm not wrong, I guess, not I guess, Prasad Sai Institute, LV Prasad. LV Prasad Eye Institute should be definitely having it.
Yeah, it is there in Hyderabad, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
They should be having, if I'm not wrong, they had a visiting consultant coming from different places, but they should be having it on certain particular days.
Okay, sure.
it's a question from Himabindu, sir. If reflex integration takes place, these visual issues can be fixed automatically?
If at all, the health of the eye is good.
Okay. Next question is from Satya. Optokinetics, who helps in this evaluation and training? And about the lights that you told, where do we get, sir?
See, I mean, this is what. See, optokinetics is a role of an occupational therapist along with this behavioral optometrist. They both have to work hand in hand for that. That is all about optokinetics for you. Visual therapist in other terms, that's a layman term. Visual therapist is a layman term, but they need to be certified as a behavioral optometrist to do this visual therapy, Saujanya.
Okay, that's important, sir. Thank you. In North Carolina, does Duke or UNC does this?
No.
And
Duke and UNC doesn't have, but there are certain private institutes in North Carolina, like Bayer Consultants and Visual Therapy LLC, I guess.
yeah, for other areas also, when you go to your insurance site, you can check who are the doctors who cover this. And sometimes you have to go privately also for behavior optometrist. So you have to check it out in your area, in your local areas. In
Just
US,
ask them to look out for a behavioral optometrist
yeah.
who is certified behavioral optometrist in their area. They should be able to find out.
Okay. So the next question is, can we check for vision issues while the child is reading? What symptoms we need to check for?
how close is he to the book, whether he's keeping the is he really going near to read it, number one. And number two, whether they are able to scan all the letters and able to pronounce it. They need to be able to read louder. They need to be able to read louder. And another one is, are they able to go in a sequence, or they jumping from one letter to other letter in a line? So these are certain things which tells that, the visual health is not good.
Sir, just if the child is resisting to read, we cannot say that it is a vision issue, right? Because child is able to read, but he is not showing interest to read, means it could be a focus and attention problem as well, right? It need not be a vision issue like that.
The major, see, that's what I mean. It is to do with visual attention and visual focusing, right? So if he's not
Okay,
able to
okay,
do that, they'll definitely become a little bit aversive and resistant to do it.
okay, okay. Sir, if the reflex integration takes place, because in the previous webinars also I heard that 90% of these kids are having retained reflexes, especially this ATNR, TLR and all. So is it a good idea to work with reflexes first, then we go for any assessments and all before, because anyway reflexes are present, no sir, with these children, with most of
No,
these
you
children.
cannot generalize things that way. You cannot generalize things that way. You first need to get
Okay,
evaluated to see whether actually there is an impact of reflexes or not.
okay, okay.
Sir, there are two more questions. Where in Chennai can be tested, sir?
In Chennai, it can be tested. I think there is a college of COVD. There is a college which does that. And if I'm not wrong, probably SRM Medical Institute also should be having it.
Sir, I spoke with, this is a very good question. So I spoke with few parents who are taking visual therapy, and my daughter has lots of visual issues. We thought of starting therapy, but some of the parents who already took therapy complained it helped temporarily. Is it correct, sir? Or it may be different for child to child?
What you need to understand is, I'm not taking sides of anybody here, or are not doing it, but uh, nowadays, if this question is from India, Uh, nowadays, I see many people coming up with a tagline of visual therapy and starting centers, but they are not certified behavioral optometrists to do. Number one, and number two, that might have been temporary, because the effect might have been temporary. The reason behind it is they wouldn't have followed the protocol, because visual therapy is always, please remember this, is always associated with movement therapy. And if visual therapy is happening without movement therapy, then definitely child will revert back. That's where I said it is a combination of vision therapist along with an occupational therapist is the team which needs to ensure that child will not regress or will not go back and have the similar problems again.
Yeah. And next question is there an age limit for these tests and therapies?
No.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay.
All right, Sujanya, then.
Yes.
All of you have a good time, and hope this was helpful for all of you.
Yes, sir,
So,
really helpful. Thank you, sir.
yeah, thank you so much. And yeah,
This topic is very informative, and thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge, sir. It has helped a lot of parents who have joined in today, and somebody is clapping for you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a very nice session.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Very nice session.
You, sir. So
Thank you, sir.
see you all soon. And, please
Thank you, sir.
understand the concept that was explained today, and try to approach these therapies in a positive attitude. Don't get carried away with some negative talk in the community. So try to give the proper help to your child. That's what we are aiming for here. Okay. I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you so much. Anyone else has a question for me apart from the webinar?
Hi, Saujanya.
Hi.
Can we have this recording of this?
At this time, we are not sharing it. It's for internal purposes only. If at all we
Okay.
we'll share it at some other time.
Sure.
Okay. Anyone else? Lakshmi Narayana Garu, the location is in North Carolina.
Thank you, Annie.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, madam.
Yeah, it's nice seeing you all today. See you all soon. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.